Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sentinel. Today, I've got a really long podcast for you, and it's an interesting one as well. About 3 months ago, I did a podcast on the Garrison Commander at West Point being relieved of his command for an alcohol related incident and also driving through the gate and not stopping at a stop sign. Then, 2 hours later, once he got home, they came in and woke him up and took him down to the PMO's office and wanted him to take a test, and he refused. So consequently, he was relieved, and then the government decided to impose charges on him. The whole matter goes to federal court, and the court finds him not guilty of everything and admonishes the government for going into his house and pulling him out. And they do find him guilty of, going through the stop sign and fine him $150 for traffic misdemeanor. So ultimately, we destroyed this guy's career, almost 28 years, and made his family suffer. So before we listen to Colonel Bianchi, I just want to remind you to hit a like, share, subscribe, and at the end, don't forget to leave a comment of your thoughts. I'm not going to tell you up front what I think. I'm going to wait till the end and then give you my conclusions of what transpired based on what we heard from Colonel Bianchi. Got Colonel Anthony Bianchi here with us today. Him and I linked up on LinkedIn, and he wanted to come and speak to the channel about the experience that he went through at West Point and clarify the incident, from his position. And I applaud that. I think that's fantastic, and it needs to be done. And so, on that note, I'm going to hand over to Colonel Bianchi. Sir, the floor is yours.
So, yes, thanks, Assad. Thanks for having me, and thanks for providing this platform. And just for clarification, it's actually Bianchi, but I get Bianchi all the time, so don't worry about it. Well, I guess I'll start off by saying, you want to talk about my background first. I mean,
sure.
I grew up in Chicago. My dad's an Italian immigrant. My mom's from Chicago. I was born and raised there until about the 8th grade. Moved to Tampa, Florida, where I went to high school and was a football star. And I claimed Tampa, Florida as home because of that. And I got recruited to play football at the collegiate level. And based on the recruiting process, I landed at West Point, United States Military Academy. And that's what got me to serve. So just to be fully upfront, I had no desire to be in the military growing up as a kid. It just kind of happened. That's why I'm a big believer in sports as a recruiting tool, because it wouldn't have got guys like me and my friends to serve it otherwise. So I went to West Point, did my 4 years. Very proud to beat Navy all those years, by the way. And I commissioned as a field artilleryman in the Army, and I did all the normal junior military officer positions you can do in the artillery on both rockets and cannon platforms. Stationed at Fort Sill and Fort Bragg, North Carolina, early on. And believe it or not, I have a break in service. I actually got out right around my 6-year mark in 2003. And spent 23 months in the private sector back in my hometown, Tampa, working as a financial advisor for a high net worth brokerage firm. And believe it, this is going to sound really cheesy and people are going to think I'm making this up, but it's not. I just had this appetite to come back in. I didn't complete all the goals I wanted to do in the Army at the time. I got out for family reasons. And then, so sitting there at a bar one day with my dad, I saw some soldiers in Fallujah. And I was like, I need to be over there. And I volunteered to come back into the Army. And I never looked back from that point on. Came back in. They kept me in my same year group. And I continued on the field artillery path. And because of that, I was able to command twice for over 38 months at the battery level. And one of those commands was in Iraq during the surge. I was able to get a graduate degree at George Mason University and teach at West Point for 4 years. Really a total of 5 years, but 4 years broken up to each, and one time during a simultaneous job. I got to serve in the Pentagon, doing some pretty cool stuff in the talent management world. And I got to do a battalion command in a very unorthodox battalion command. Basically, my battalion was more like a consulting firm. I had a bunch of active duty senior enlisted and officer personnel under me. And we were out there advising 9 National Guard units, if you want to call them clients, that's great, across the Northeast United States, on helping them train and get ready for their deployment on their 5-year cycle versus the normal Army's 2-year cycle, active duty cycle. And then after that, I got selected to go to the National War College. So I got another master's degree in security studies, national security strategy, excuse me. And then while I was there, I popped on the brigade command list, and they slotted me for Garrison Commander at West Point. So the superintendent at the time needed somebody to be the deputy athletic director prior to me being the Garrison Commander. He thought, since I'm going to be the Garrison Commander anyway, he by name requested me to come serve as a deputy athletic director for Army West Point Athletics, which was a great bringing on job, believe it or not, because I got to meet all the players, got to understand the behind the scenes things that go on there at West Point more than I did when I taught there and when I was as a cadet. So I thought it was great. And then I was a Garrison Commander, and then I finished my career slotted in basically a placeholding position until I retired this past January. So bottom line is the last half of my career was not your traditional field artilleryman career, but it gave me a lot of expertise across the board.
Let me ask you some questions. Now, the first one is, what position did you play in football?
So I played linebacker in high school, recruited as linebacker, but my sophomore year at West Point, they moved me to defensive end. And I never
Really? How big are you? I mean,
when I played, I was about 6'2", 250.
Jesus. And what do you weigh now?
I'm about 6'2", and I would say about 238.
So you're a pretty big guy.
I'm a big guy, yes. Yeah, wow. Sometimes to my fault and sometimes to my advantage.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. So when you went off to, what differences did you see in the Army when you first left and then when you came back? Did you see any major differences, or it was just seamless?
It's funny you say that, because it's actually a thing I think about all the time. When I was in the Army from 97 to 2003, there was just a different attitude, especially around the social aspect of the units.
Yep.
I mean, there were things called officers' clubs, which were no longer around when I came back in, which shocked the hell out of me. And this whole concept, this is probably going to make people cringe when I say this, but this whole concept of the command team was not a thing from 97 to 2003. At least it wasn't as magnified as it was when I came back in. I never even heard of a change of responsibility until I came back in after my break in service for the Sergeant Major side of the house. And I only bring it up because I think it exacerbated that shadow chain of command that goes on within the military.
Tell me more about that. What do you mean?
Well, what I mean is, to me, I grew up in a world where, yes, your NCOs, your right-hand person. I think the reason why our Army and our military in general is one of the strongest forces in the world, if not the strongest, is because of our NCO Corps. There's no disregarding that. But my point is, there's only one commander in a unit. There's only one commander. And so I think the lines get crossed when they start emphasizing that command team a lot. And so you have certain folks who take advantage of that position. If they're not used correctly, they can cause some issues. And sometimes it, like I said, exacerbates that shadow chain of command where soldiers and junior officers may not follow the commander per se exactly because they're following some other, implied policy that's not really a policy.
Yeah. And what's the role of the Sergeant Major in the Army?
Senior enlisted advisor to the commander.
What is that? I mean, I'm thinking the same way, and I always thought, I'm not sure what that means. Advise you on what? On enlisted matters, on tactics, on good order and discipline?
But the best way it was described to me as a mentor, and the way I utilized him, was obviously, first and foremost, if you're going to do anything that's going to impact any type of enlisted personnel, especially their quality of life, I would always get feedback from the Sergeant Major. Right. That person should be the resident expert on what should work, not work, help you foresee any pitfalls or landmines. But the best way I meant to describe the Sergeant Major is that's your special tool in your toolkit. Wherever you have a problem in your unit, you focus that Sergeant Major on that problem.
Right.
So they're like a utility player in a sporting analogy.
Yeah. So and 100%. So when I was a battalion commander, I had him be responsible for good order and discipline of the unit. That was his, that was his basket. And in combat, I used him as a command group, separate of myself.
Correct.
So I'd be with the main effort, he'd be with the supporting effort, and then my XO would be with the second supporting effort, or the log train, making sure stuff is getting to the front. And that was good utilization. So Sergeant Major had his own jump CP, and he went around the battlefield as needed and as required, separate from myself. So I was with my OPSO and my air officer, with the main effort. Okay, so it seems like you had a really diverse and illustrious career. I mean, it's not. I mean, they don't pick a snuffy like me to be a Garrison Commander at West Point. That's a prestigious position, right?
I was just as shocked when I found out, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So let's talk about this incident that transpired. Tell us your side, please.
Okay, so I mean, I'll talk wave tops. If you want to dig into anything, feel free to
Sure.
ask questions. I mean, so I was Garrison Commander going on just over a year at this point in time in July of 2020. Was it 2023? Um, and on this particular night, July 22nd, it was a Saturday. There was a event going on that weekend at West Point for the Army Football Club. It's an alumni group of that's formed by former Army football players,
Right.
coaches, trainers, etc. They do it every year, and they come up to West Point. They do a meeting, they do some golf, and then they have a dinner, and that's about it. That's the whole weekend. So on this particular Saturday, I did not participate in any of the events because we had a really, really, really nasty storm 2 weeks
Sure.
prior that annihilated West Point. And I was actually working on Saturday on my own accord because the following Sunday and Monday I was meeting with the congressional delegation and I had to brief them on the damages. So I was going around all day Saturday checking on the major damage sites, our soldier barracks, our dental clinics, my garrison headquarters, the rugby complex, major road washouts, etc. I had a buddy of mine also staying with me that weekend for that alumni event.
Right.
So he just palled around with me in my government vehicle, stopping at all the locations throughout the day. And oh, by the way, I was also making sure the golf course was going to be open and making sure that the dinner at Eisenhower Hall that night was going to have air conditioning working because in July in New York it's pretty hot. So I only give that for context because I wasn't participating in anything. Later on that day at about 6:30, we're getting ready to go to the dinner. I make the decision to go in my government vehicle to dinner, which, by the way, is a mile and a half or less from my home on West Point. The reason why I made that decision was the one area I did not check that night was the Anderson Rugby Complex. And so my whole thought process at the time, and hindsight's 2020, you
Sure.
can ding me or whatever you want, was I'll go to the dinner and then on the way home, I'll go drive through the Anderson Rugby Complex, which the road was flooded, by the way. So I don't want to drive a personal vehicle through there. I want to drive a government vehicle. But I use that government vehicle earlier in the week to do the same thing. So I know it would
Right.
work. So that was the context of that. I get to this dinner at about 7 p.m. ish is what I remember. I missed the entire cocktail hour. And as I walk in, people were starting to take their seats to hear the superintendent of West Point give his opening remarks because he was the speaker. And the way they do it
Right.
is the speaker speaks first before the dinner. So I go in there. Me and my buddy sit at a table in the back of the room. My buddy goes to the cash bar to order a drink, unbeknownst to me. He comes back, hands me a drink. He sits down, and we're listening to the speech. Everything's great. Most of the speech, the superintendent's talking about how great of a job I'm doing as a former football player, as Garrison Commander in light of the storm. He even has me stand up, and the room applauds me. I only say that because the 140 plus people in attendance, they all saw me there. Now the speech is over, and now it's time to go through the buffet line catered by an organization called the Directorate of Cadet Activities, otherwise known as DCA. Fun fact here. The Garrison Commander, by Army regulations, is responsible for all food and beverage and catering operations on the installation. Okay? There is a friction between this organization, DCA, and my garrison, of course, which predated my command.
Right.
The previous 2 or 3 garrison commanders had the same problems. And for
Right.
context, they were even nicknaming this friction across West Point as the Food Wars. And they even enlisted help from one of the academic departments to do a white paper study on an economic solution for all the parties to coexist legally and feasibly on the installation. That's
Right.
how deep it went. Okay. So anyway, I'm going through the line. And so these SATs didn't like me because I was doing a lot of things aggressively that they just didn't like. As a matter of fact, right before this night in question, I was actually doing a thing to refurbish the officers club at West Point, which is called the West Point Club, and bring in some restaurants and some privatized restaurateurs, which that DCA didn't like. So anyway, I'm going through this line, and I'm actually going through the line with a former superintendent, retired 3-star General Bob Caslin. Okay.
Yep.
This is important because he was with me when this alleged incident occurred. And so we're going through the line. And as dumb as it's going to sound, Assad, I'm going to tell you up front, nothing's petty at West Point, okay? Nothing is petty. I'm going through the line, and there's a stalemate in the queue as you're approaching the meat carving station at the end of the buffet line. So we're all just kind of standing there talking, waiting. And I'm just kind of watching this guy cut the meat. I never paid attention to how they do that stuff. I really didn't. I thought it was really neat that he kept cutting all the fat off and moving it to the side. I just thought, okay, that's pretty cool. It's awesome. So he's handing everybody their piece of meat. And then I go up there and he takes all that fat he cut off, and literally it felt like he deliberately slapped it on my plate. So again, I'm looking at this through a lens of the friction, this deliberate, what I felt was deliberate. So I take 2 steps to go back to my table, and I turn around and I ask him about it. I confronted him about it. I say, hey, why would you give me this? Why can't I get a good piece? And he got, in my opinion, his tongue got very lippy with me, said something to the effect of, I'll do whatever I want. I don't care. And so I said, this is what I'm going to clarify, which really bugs me about my whole story up to this point that no one's ever asked me. I never said, do you know who I am? I never said it. This is exactly what I said based on that friction. I said, hey, I just got to know, did you do this on purpose because of me and what I do, or did you not know who I am? That's kind of how I said it.
Okay.
That was the context. Because I wanted to know. I just wanted to know.
Right.
I go, either I'm reading this situation wrong or you did this on purpose. Just let me know. And he got lippy again and said, I don't care who you are. And so I said, okay, that's fine. So here's the best part about it. I said, is your manager here? He goes, yeah, she's right over there. And I knew her. So I walked away. This whole thing lasted no more than 30 seconds. No yelling went on, no threatening behaviors, nothing. I go back to my table. I wave the manager over. I tell her this guy got a little attitude with me. I don't know what his issue is. I found out later through the process that he had a bad day that day. He was pissed off that he got asked to work the meat cutting line. He didn't have his smoke breaks. All this stuff came out later. And I guess I was the brunt of it when I walked up there. And so she takes care of it. And I think this happens between 7:30 and 7:45 at night. I don't think anything of it anymore, Saad. It's already a gone memory. It was nothing to me. There was nothing happened.
Sure.
The rest of the formal agenda continues. And as we're getting up, the thing's over. People are getting up, they're mingling. People are finishing their drinks. They're kind of doing their own socializing in their little pockets. I see 2 of my MPs walking around Eisenhower Hall, which is not uncommon when there's an event. But I just thought it was odd that they were in the room walking around. But I didn't go up to them. I just, whatever. I said hi to one of them. I didn't think anything of it. And then my phone rings. And it's my deputy, my civilian deputy, a GS-15. And he says, hey, sir, we're downstairs in Eisenhower Hall. Can you meet me down here? I said, really? Okay, I'll be down in a second. I'm thinking storm damage issue.
Right.
So and when I got this phone call, by the way, the superintendent was standing right next to me as we're talking to 3 or 4 other people. And he also noticed the MPs as well. And I just said, hey, sir, that was my deputy. Let me go find out what's going on. I'll come back and debrief you. He says, great. He didn't seem concerned at all. I go downstairs. I see my deputy and my senior MP, who's the director of emergency services, a lieutenant colonel MP from the Army. And they both work for me. And I see them, and I'm in a good mood. I'm like, hey, what's up, guys? What's going on? What do you need? And my deputy says the following to me: sir, we're here tonight because the MPs received a call about a disturbance involving me threatening a man's life and being drunk and belligerent at Eisenhower Hall. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I'm like halfway laughing about it because it's so ridiculous. But I also understand the gravity of this comment. I'm like, oh my God, this doesn't look right. So after about a minute or 2 of talking, I realized they're talking about the meat cutting situation. So I quickly try to explain myself. And this is when one of the junior MPs is there and they keep cutting me off. Sir, we'll handle this. And I kind of got, to be fair, I kind of got annoyed at that.
Right.
And my deputy stepped in and said, hey, let the GC, they call me GC, let the GC talk. So I told him what I just told you. I told him my side of the story. And the senior MP there says, sir, this seems like it's blown out of proportion. But since we're here, we'll talk to a few people and maybe collect a statement. Go enjoy the rest of your evening. So finally, I'm like, okay, common sense prevails, but I'm still annoyed about this. So I go back upstairs. I go to the superintendent. I tell him exactly what I learned. He doesn't seem concerned. I then stay at this location, Eisenhower Hall, mingling with folks till about 10:15. So I didn't even leave. I was there for like 40 minutes after the MPs arrived, after they told me this. And I left on my own accord with my buddy. No one detained me. No one arrested me. Nobody sat me down and took a statement. We did anything. Nothing. It was all validated as not to be true. So instead of going to the rugby complex, my buddy and I got invited to an impromptu social gathering to continue hanging out at the hotel there, which is also on post.
Yep.
right? So the store right there was I left post with the vehicle. I never left post with the vehicle. So I went there. It's about 2 miles away. I parked my government vehicle in my own parking spot that I have there. I went inside. We hung out for like 2 hours. It was, when I say it's a slow night, it was a slow night. Guys were tired from golfing. I was tired from working 18-hour days last 2 weeks. We just kind of reminisced about the glory days, talked a little bit about life, and that's about it. People started to go to bed in their rooms. I grabbed my buddy. I said, let's get out of here. We use the bathroom. We leave, and it's about 12:30 when we leave Hotel Thayer. I come to, but the Hotel Thayer is situated just outside the main cantonment checkpoint.
Mm-hmm.
They do that for ease of access for patronage.
Right.
So I go back to the gate, and as I pull up to the gate, and this is all on video, by the way, so I can send you the video after this is over. This is all on video. I pull up to the gate. There's a canopy, and on the right hand, there's 2 lanes. In the right-hand lane, there's a civilian vehicle under the canopy pulled over with 2 civilians standing next to it. There's an MP vehicle behind that one with 2 MPs searching the vehicle. In the left-hand lane, there's a guard shack with 2 civilian gate guards, the Department of the Army security guards. And there's a stop sign there at the guard shack because you're supposed to stop and show your ID. Typical entrance to a military installation. So I'm coming up in the left-hand lane because the right-hand lane is obviously blocked. But every time I see my soldiers at the gate, because my MPs normally don't work the gate, I stop and say hi to them, how they're doing.
I mean,
I pull right up about literally a car length short of the stop sign, parallel to the MP vehicle. I stop the car. I roll down the passenger window because my passenger window is facing the MPs. I yell over to have one of them come over. The MP comes over, leans into the window, puts his left hand on the roof. We have about a 10-second conversation that goes something like, how are you guys doing tonight? What's up with that vehicle you're searching? Do you need anything? The guy comes back with, sir, we're doing great. We're searching the vehicle because they had open container. No issues here. Don't need anything. Stay safe. Have a good night, sir. And he taps the roof of my vehicle, which I interpret as good to go.
Right.
I'm also in my government vehicle, which has a huge placard of a license plate on the windshield that says Garrison Commander with the Colonel insignia. And my normal routine for a year in command was I never showed my ID in that vehicle because they told me to put it away. So after about a month of being told to put it away, I never showed it again. I just slowed down. They saw my face. They see the car. I drive through. Well, that's exactly what I did here. I proceeded forward, the car linked forward. I tapped my brakes, pointed to my placard. The guy made a hand gesture from the guard check, which I interpreted as go on through.
Right.
And I drive through a normal speed, normal whatever, a normal 5 to 7 minute drive back to my house. Again, no pullover, no traffic stop, no accident, no barrier activation for somebody who runs the gate. No one stopped me at the gate to tell me to get out of my vehicle. Nothing happens.
Okay, here you see Bianchi rolling up to the MP as he described. Rolls down his window, the MP comes over, they talk to each other, and then you'll see the MP tap the roof. There you go. He proceeds forward to the stop sign. He hits his brakes, and the guard waves him off. You can see him wave him off. So what did he do wrong?
I get home at about 12:45. Okay, so let me just backtrack. The dinner interaction with the meat cutter was at about 7:30-ish.
Right.
The MPs come between 8:45 and 9 to the call. I go through that gate at 12:39 per the video. I'm home at 12:45. I go home. My buddy and I get in the house. We have a couple of nightcaps. I go to bed on my second floor master bedroom. My buddy goes to bed on the third floor. I got a big house. It's 7 bedrooms, 3 floors, and a basement. 2:45 in the morning, I hear knocking and my dog's barking. I wake up and the knocking's not coming from either my front or back exterior doors to the house. They're knocking on my second floor master bedroom house.
You got to be shitting me.
In the house. So I wake up and I'm in my underwear. I'm painting you the picture. I'm in my underwear. I get up. I open the door. And standing there are my sergeant major and my deputy, my 2 trusted colleagues and friends right there. And my wife and daughters left that morning to drive to Tampa to take my daughter back to college. So I'm thinking, holy crap, something happened to my kid. My wife. And before I can even ask them about it, they start talking, and I realize that's not the case. So now I'm thinking GC mode. They needed a signature. Something happened at the gate. There's a flood issue. They couldn't get a hold of whatever. And they're like, sorry, we tried to call you. Yeah, I go, my phone's on vibrate. It's 3 a.m. Like I didn't answer, sorry. And they said, I go, what's going on? What's the deal? And my sergeant major tells me, sir, the MPs are outside. They want to talk to you. And I'm like, okay, what's it about? I'm not thinking anything negative.
Right.
They said, she said, sir, I don't know the details. They said something about you ran the gate tonight. And I go, ran the gate? I was really confused because in my world, running the gate means an unidentified person blew through the gate.
Right.
Risk to the installation, and now you have to go chase after them, whatever. And so I'm like, I'm really confused. I'm like, run the gate. I even stopped and talked to somebody. And then my deputy basically said, after back and forth, my deputy says to me something to the effect of, I think it's just best if we just all go outside and clear this up. I said, okay, let me get dressed. So the sergeant major hands me my clothes. I sit down in the bed. I put my clothes on, put my shoes on. I go downstairs. I open the door, and there's like, from what I remember, 2 to 3 cop cars. There's about several MPs to include all the senior MPs. So my DES director was there. My DES sergeant major was there. My provost marshal was there. And then a staff sergeant and some other younger enlisted were there, MPs. And I walk outside, and the staff sergeant walks up to me and says, hey, sir, we need to talk to you down at the station, down at the provost office, which is the MP station.
Sure.
And I said, okay, that's kind of weird, but I don't have my wallet and keys. I'll just ride the sergeant major. I'll meet you there. And he goes, no, sir, you got to ride in the back of the vehicle. And so that's the first time my spidey sense finally said something's not right.
Yeah.
So then I got into sort of professional mode. I was kind of pissed off, but I was kind of like shocked too. I just got woken up at 3 a.m. I have no idea no one's told me anything yet except my sergeant major, and she didn't even know the details. So I get in the car. They drive me down to the station, which is like a 3 to 4 minute ride. We get there at about 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe a little after. And they put me in this room, and 20 minutes later, a guy walks in, my DES sergeant major, who, by the way, does not like me. And he's told me that. Matter of fact, about 6 to 8 weeks prior to this night, he was filling in for my sergeant major while she was on a work trip. And we're in my office, believe it or not, talking about leadership.
Right.
Because I like that topic. And I asked him, being an MP sergeant major, I said, hey, you've been around a lot of garrisons before. How am I doing? How am I doing he's been there about 8 months. I go, how am I doing as a commander? And I'm not going to say he shocked me. I could take negative feedback. But he's like, sir, I think you're doing terrible. So I'm like, okay, well, why? And his whole premise in this conversation was because I reinstilled hails and farewells for the garrison, 1,200 employee unit, all civilian except for 100 of them. I reinvigorated this hail and farewell concept, and I reinvigorated a monthly stable call. So at the last Friday of every month, we would have a stable call at the West Point Club where I would invite people to come and bring whoever they want from their directorate to come grab a drink or a snack or whatever. You don't have to drink alcohol. Just come by, socialize on your way home, and I'll buy everybody their first round. That was kind of my thing. If you come, I'll buy you your first round. It can be a Coke, it can be a beer, it can be whatever. And we're doing it every Friday. And then the last Friday of every quarter, we would make that into a impromptu hail and farewell where they can introduce new people, say goodbye to them. We have 1,200 people. It's hard to do the formal one.
Right.
And people liked it. It started to gain momentum, except for these MPs, specifically this guy. So he tells you that's the basis of this whole thing and how I'm glamorizing alcohol abuse and mandatory fun, although it was never mandatory. And then he goes on to say he was very proud in his career to be a part of 2 reliefs of command of other 06s. He tells me that about 6 to 8 weeks prior to this in my office.
Right.
Talk about foreshadowing, right? So he walks into the interrogation room and he just starts barking at me. He's like, sir, you're here tonight because you didn't follow proper gate procedures when you went through their gate. And we think you didn't follow those gate procedures because you're driving while intoxicated because of an earlier allegation of you being drunk and belligerent at Eisenhower Hall. And right away I jumped on that and I'm like, are you kidding me? I go, that Eisenhower Hall thing happened at like 7:30. I went through that gate 5 hours later. And your MPs came to Eisenhower Hall and saw nothing. Your MP I talked to at the gate did nothing. And then you come to my house 3 hours later. So explain to me, Assad, how can it, whether you believe me or not, or you believe the MPs, how is it okay to go to somebody's house at almost 3 a.m, 2.5 hours after you last saw him or her riding in a vehicle and arrest them illegally and tell them that you were being
Well, it's not okay. Absolutely not. They violated your rights.
Well, that's exactly what happened that night.
Yeah.
So long story short, I'm at the police station. They release me. I go home. I get suspended that evening, so I never get to meet with the congressional delegation. Which is kind of funny. And then for 30 days, I'm waiting. I'm just waiting. There's no investigation being done. There's no what the Army calls an Article 15-6 investigation. Sure. I think all the services had the same thing, which is crazy. In today's world, we investigate everything overly. I think you don't investigate this. Instead, they relied upon a law enforcement report created by the same MPs who I was in charge of, who may have been vindictive towards me, right? Who wrote a very biased and one-sided police report. I'll give you an example. 140, 145 people attended that dinner. Guess how many people they interviewed for that report? Zero. They interviewed the meat cutter, 2 of his buddies, and 2 other random DCA employees. Oh, by the way, they never took a statement from the bartenders that were there either.
Or the retired 3-star.
Or the retired 3-star, or the current superintendent who was standing with me.
Yeah.
They didn't do any of that. My lawyers did all that for court. They interviewed attendees. They got the 3-star to come testify in court. They got the bartenders to come testify and debunked the entire biased police report that was, in my opinion, written, mischaracterized, in some cases fabricated. Okay? That's what they went off of. And so 30 days later, I was then relieved of my command by the commander of Installation Management Command, which runs all the garrisons. And then the same day, I was given a general officer memorandum of reprimand by the superintendent of West Point, which he later filed in my permanent file, despite my rebuttal. And after winning in the DMV court, where the judge on the record said my Fourth Amendment was violated and they never took my driving privileges, after winning in federal court, when all the charges were dropped, or I was found not guilty on all the charges except for a stop sign where I paid a traffic fine of $150.
$150, yeah.
And they dropped the misuse of a vehicle charge before the trial. And after an Army Grade Determination Review Board also determined that I served satisfactorily and allowed me to keep my rank, they still refused to remove the GOMAR from my permanent file. So I'm currently petitioning that right now. I'm in that process to get it removed. And that's it. I was basically detained in my house for about 15 months, pending all this legal process, while I was in a placeholder position where I was told, you're going to serve in this position, but you're not in charge of anything. So I just did nothing, basically, and just waited till the legal process was over. So
let me get back to the beginning. This meat carving dude.
Yeah.
Did he know you? I mean, was there a run-in prior to that anywhere?
Zero run-in. He only probably knew me as a passing. That might be the Garrison Commander, because our faces are posted everywhere. But I've never had any interaction, physical, talking, nothing with him until that moment.
So why did he pick you out of that 140 some people and give you that slab of fat?
That was my question that night. That was my point. Yeah. I don't know. That's why I asked that question. And that's why I gave you the context of the friction, because I didn't know if that was related to that or just some random one-off. I was 100% expecting him to say, "Oh man, I'm really sorry. Here's another piece. Sorry about that." That's what I was expecting when I asked him. So,
yeah. So the second point that I think a lot of viewers brought up was, I mean, drinking. You had a drink and you drove a government vehicle.
Yep.
So that was just error in judgment, or
error in judgment. I mean, so I'll tell you this. I'm not trying to justify by any means, but I'm going to give context. I know the stories about that. I had a bunch of drinks. No, I had a drink at that dinner, and I don't even think I finished it, because my buddy had bought it and set it down next to my table, next to my plate with me when we were there. That was it.
And any drinks at the hotel on CCTV?
Yes, I had 2 drinks at the hotel.
And
but I was in never any way inebriated or anything.
Yeah, so, but I believe, I don't know what the Army regulations are. I know in the Marine Corps you can't drive if you've had any alcohol, especially a government vehicle.
Correct. No, I never disputed that. I never disputed that from day one.
Right.
But here's the funny part, though, Assad. They never brought that up in any of the charges.
Yeah, I noticed.
It's not even. Yeah, it's crazy.
Because I think they stepped on their. I mean, it's okay. So that's one issue. The other issue is, how could they invade your house? It's an invasion. You didn't invite them in.
Correct.
And regardless if you know them or they're your colleagues or they work for you, they can't walk. How do they get inside your house?
My doors were unlocked. Everyone's door at West Point's unlocked.
So they
That's
just
part of the
troop.
reason why I'm telling the story. The West Point community needs to hear that people will go into your house. My back door and my front door were unlocked. And here's the one part I did not clarify, and I'll bring this up now since you talked
Sure.
about entering the home. The question I always get is, why did your sergeant major and deputy go into the house?
Right.
Right. Well, if you ask them, and we did, we have affidavits from them. They were told a false narrative to get them motivated to go into the home.
Yeah.
The bottom line was in my deputy's sworn statement, he talks about, I blew through the gate drunk. The MPs immediately chased me. I evaded them, and they found me at my house barricading in, refusing to come out. And then my lawyer always jokes around with, well, how could you be barricaded in when your doors were unlocked? And I never refused to come out because the only time I was asked to come out, guess what? I went outside.
So, I mean, I'm trying to make sense of this whole thing, right? I mean, it's just so off the wall incident
Yeah, I
that
know.
when you got home, you go to bed and then they invade your house and then they claim that you're drunk and I believe in the story that the PMO ordered you to take a breathalyzer and you refused.
No, so in the story, here's what happened. They come to my house, they take me home, they take me to the station, excuse me. Timeline matters here. So remember, I got home at 12:45.
Yeah.
I was unmonitored in my residence from 12:45 to 2:45.
Yeah.
Okay. So who knows what I did in those 2 hours? And
Right.
it really is nobody's business, to be fair.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so they come in the home, they take me to the police station. I get there at about 2:55 or 3 o'clock. I forgot the exact time. They don't even read me my rights till almost 4 a.m, 3:55. And at that point in time is when they asked me to do the breathalyzer. Now, at that point in time, it was some sergeant MP who came in doing his job. Hey, sir, are you ready to do a breathalyzer? Read me my rights and asked to do a breathalyzer. I said, absolutely not. And they asked me why not. And I said, well, to be honest, the way I was arrested didn't seem right. And the way you're treating me seems a little unfair. So I don't trust you with any specimen. And I started to invoke my rights at that point. I said, I don't want to give any specimens, say anymore, or sign anything until I talk to my lawyer. And they came and asked me a second time. And then here's the best part. This is how screwy the story gets. And I think the Marines wouldn't even screw this up. They call the MP company commander, who's actually on pass this time. She's not even physically there. She's a captain. Right. She's my de facto headquarters garrison company commander as the MP company commander.
Right.
But I'm her senior raider. I'm her commander. So the way I explain to people is I'm on her books for accountability.
Sure.
And that kind of thing. But she can't give me any legal orders.
Right.
Like
she's a subordinate officer. Yeah.
Correct. Well, she proceeds to get on the phone and give me a legal order to go give blood at the hospital. And she says failure to do so is a violation of Article 92 of the UCMJ. Failure to follow lawful order. And I kept trying to tell her on the phone that's not a lawful order. And she kept cutting me off like the sergeant major was earlier. Sir, sober up. Quit using your rank. Quit talking over me. Like this was a playbook witch hunt from the start. And to this, and the lawyers, the SJAs to this day tried to make it sound like I was her subordinate in that regard. Makes zero sense. Yep. So I refuse to give blood as well. Yep.
So the next morning they release you, and what's the first thing you got hold of the lawyers, or what happened?
Yeah, I called the lawyer. Told them the wave top basics of everything as I knew them. And he said, great, we'll tackle this on Monday. Seems like a no-brainer. It seems like they screwed up here, a big mistake. And this is the part of this. You asked earlier what I learned about this whole thing.
Yeah.
This is where I served 27 years, 9 months. I've been a commander on the other side of this process. I trusted the process. They tell you all the time that as you get higher in rank and more command, allegations will be levied against you, investigations will be done on you. Just cooperate, trust the process. So I went into like quiet professional mode and just said, okay, I still think the soup was there that night. He knows I wasn't drunk at the dinner. He knows whatever, just they're going to do a 15-6. The truth will come out. They never conducted a 15-6. They never once tried to validate the allegations.
So who's they? Because the MPs aren't going to do it.
No, the leadership, the
The
superintendent or the MCOM commander.
So
I had
this,
2 3-stars.
sure. No, I get it. Did the superintendent ever call you in and say, "Hey, Tony, what happened"?
No, I never told my story until I did an open door with him after everything had been transpired, except for the criminal charges.
So you'd been
I never
relieved.
got criminally charged till October. Think about that. And it goes back to what I said earlier, Assad. If you believe the allegations, let's just say you believe them.
Right.
You already relieved me.
Right.
You already gave me a Gomar. What's the point of taking me to federal court on drummed up charges that the evidence clearly shows I'm going to win?
But I thought you requested to go to federal court. Your lawyers did.
I did not request.
So the government pursued this. The Army pursued this. In other words,
Army pursued it. Hell no, I didn't want to go. I don't want any charges. I didn't ask for any of that.
So why did the Army pursue this? To justify the relief, perhaps?
I think this. Okay, this is only my own speculation.
Yeah.
I cannot prove this. This is my speculation. I think shit went awry that night with the MPs. I think the MPs were out to get me. I really firmly believe that. When they went to the staff judge advocate, we could talk about prosecutors in a second.
Right.
When they went to that person, or that office, I should say, they treated it as a typical DWI without knowing the details. I think when they peeled that onion back a day or two later and realized the entry into the home and also, I think they helped MPs create a narrative to back into the arrest. Because when you read all the statements, you could tell they're backing into it. And the things that these junior MPs are saying in their statements, they would never say. They were coached to say and write in their statements, which was obviously exposed in court. But my point is, I think they saw some bad stuff went on. And instead of exposing all that bad stuff, let's just pile on Colonel Bianchi and he'll just walk away. That's what happened.
Yeah, but I mean, it really bugs the shit out of me that the command will allow something like that, because you're not only dealing with, put your career aside for a minute, you're also dealing with the human aspect of it, your family, right?
Correct.
You yourself, right?
Correct.
And there's an obligation for the senior commander, your superintendent, your 3-star, to look out for your welfare. Just like, in the Marine Corps, we have a procedure called request mass, where you have to give the troop, his say in front of the commander. And unfortunately for officers, we don't do that. We just sort of throw the book at them, right? And we just pile on the charges to silence you, for lack of a better word, right? Because they put you in this legal limbo that you were there for, you said 15 months in limbo?
It took about 15 months to get through the whole thing through the court.
That you can't talk to the media. You can't do anything. The only person you talk to is your lawyer, and that's coming. Did you have a civilian lawyer or a military lawyer?
I had both. I had the assigned TDS attorney, and I had a civilian lawyer and a couple others as a team. Court. Yeah, you're right. The system is not set up to take care of leaders in the military, which I believe, honestly, if you want to get a real PhD on this, that's a national security threat, in my opinion, because you can get a good commander who does something minor or not really even true at all, and look what happens. You pull them out of the formation, you hammer them, you erode the trust of the formation. And oh, by the way, if people are really hell bent on me having that drink and getting in the car, I get it. I understand that. But my point is, the process is the punishment. You already relieved me. You had me endure a 15-month nightmare, legal fees, no recourse. My family's embarrassed. I have an 11-year-old daughter that went to West Point Elementary.
Oh, man.
Total side note here. Little kid starts making fun of her, saying the new Garrison Commander is better than your daddy ever was. And I only bring that up to say, what 10-year-old kid at that time is talking about the Garrison Commander? They're only talking about it because the parents are at the house. So the rumor mill starts to go crazy. I've been claimed to have done so many things. I was even told I stabbed somebody and kidnapped a girl in a van, based off the rumor mill. So it's embarrassing and it's frustrating. But that's fine.
That leads into the one question I wanted to ask you is the impact on the family. I mean, and you kind of bring that up with your 11-year-old daughter. I mean, that's just, she doesn't deserve that, first of all. And second of all, these commanders, a 3-star, he puts you in this legal limbo rather than saying, you know what, I'm relieving you because you drank and you drove. Okay, got it. And you're an honorable person. You say, Roger that. I'm moving on. And then let you retire, let you go home, right? Rather than holding on to you and let you suffer. Now, every day on those 15 months, how was your interaction with other officers that were coming and going at West Point?
Very limited. Very limited. It's probably no different anywhere else in the military, but West Point's its own fishbowl. You got a lot of high-ranking folks there, a lot of permanent faculty folks there.
Right.
There were very few people that reached out to me and stayed with me through this whole ordeal. You get to find out who your true friends are, your true colleagues are.
Yeah.
It's kind of a mixed bag, right? You have folks that hated you before the incident, and now they have a more reason to hate you. You got folks that were indifferent about you, and now you give them a reason not to like you, or they think they have a reason. And then you got folks who like you no matter what. And it's funny, as the story started to come out more later in the process, where people started to see the video of the gate that got leaked. Some people did talk to me. I told them what happened when I won in court. And then when I went in court, now folks started to change their tune a little bit. Oh man, you got screwed. I can't believe this happened. Oh my God. But my point is, who's holding people accountable? Who's holding the MPs accountable for going into my house? Who's holding the SGA accountable for pursuing these charges and not fighting to do a 15-6 or recommend or finding the truth instead? Leadership tolerated all these things to happen. That's the part that's frustrating to me.
Could you have asked for a 15-6?
Yeah, they told me they were doing one. And I know they started to do one, and then 48 to 72 hours later, they stopped. Don't know why.
I'll tell you, Tony, I read many of the court documents because they're available online, right? So, and trying to go through this whole thing, I fundamentally believe you got screwed. Okay, that's what I believe. I believe you had an error in judgment with that one drink. I didn't realize you had multiple drinks, at the hotel. That's fine. It doesn't matter. But you got double screwed, right?
Yep.
Twice, right? First is they went to your house to try to nail you for a DUI, right?
2.5 hours later.
Right. 2.5 hours later. And you could have had a bottle of Jack Daniels in your house, which you have every right to do so, right?
Correct.
And the second double screwing is that 15th month that they put you in isolation in legal limbo, because once you're on legal hold, you can't retire.
Right.
And you suffer, right? And that's worse than going to prison, I think, because you're in front of your peers. Everybody knows what the hell's going on. And your family is in legal limbo too, right? They can't do anything either.
Well, two things on that, Assad. They robbed me of a good transition. That's number one.
Right.
I couldn't take advantage of any programs that they offer now for folks. I had no timeline because I never knew when court was going to be over, and I never knew what the outcome was going to be, to be quite honest, because you never know in court. So I could never plan on anything. And I had no time. I couldn't complete my medical on time or within time. I had to rush through everything at the end for my VA claims. And you're right. They robbed me of that transition. And I would argue one point that you said, though, I think people didn't know what happened, which makes it worse. People are just making their own opinions, what they think happened. And that's even worse.
Yeah. I'm having a tough time to put it together in my brain that a bunch of junior MPs colluded to go after the Garrison Commander.
I wasn't the junior MPs. It wasn't them. Remember, I told you, the junior MPs are just doing a job. It's the sergeant major who didn't like me, the provost. So I'll give you more context.
Right.
The Thursday before this weekend, I was working out of my temporary office because of the storm, right?
Right.
I got an email, the Monday before, I got an email from the Army's Public Affairs Office. I'm CC'd on an email written directly to my MP company leadership.
Right.
The big Army PAO is writing my company commander and a couple folks. That should never happen.
Yeah.
In the email, it says, "Get your rosters ready. It's that time of year for the celebrity softball tournament with the New York Mets." So I write back. I go, "Hey, thanks for writing. I appreciate it. If next time you stop contacting my MP company commander and her team, and contact either the USMA or MCOM PAO channels for any requests for support. That way we can get into the proper operational channels for taskings. Thank you."
Sure.
The reason why I did that was I had a problem my whole year in command with my MP company doing things rogue. Not bad things. They were just doing all these things on the weekends on their own. But on the flip side, they were complaining about being overworked because they are overworked there. So if I'm going to go argue to not have you overworked, you can't be doing these other things
You
on
can
the
be.
side.
Yep.
So my whole thing was be visible
Right.
and put it out there. So they came and saw me on Thursday, open door policy, that Lieutenant Colonel MP, the first sergeant, and a couple of sergeant first class MPs. They came and saw me. They pled their case about why we should not turn this over to the USMA G3 channels for operational planning, et cetera, et cetera. They were worried about losing that game. They wanted it to be their own thing. And I basically said, no, this is not how the Army works. This is not how we work. We can still protect it. We can have influence on the taskings. We can make sure you guys get tasked with it. I just want to be above board on everything. And I mean, they were really hurt. They were really upset when they left that day. That was 2 days before this happened, right? I was also getting into their crap about a month or two into this about parking, towing, things they're doing wrong. Because what you got to realize, Assad, the MP company commander, the DES director, and the provost marshal were all brand new in their positions within less than 2 months of that incident.
Right.
So there was some animosity. And another learning point was I did not realize how much they actually hated me until I got all the court records and all their discovery notes and everything they said about me to folks and how they were quote unquote planning to get me anyway. So it's a learning point. It was a blind spot that I had in my command. Because I'm usually a good guy. I feel like people respect me and like me.
Right.
I already know you're not going to please everybody. It's leadership 101.
Sure.
I did not see the hatred that they had for me at that time. I just didn't see it. And it wasn't the junior folks, mind you. They were just pawns being puppeted by the senior folks. All three of those senior people I mentioned were standing behind my house watching the entry into the home. Think about that. Your senior police officers who know better are watching an illegal intrusion into a house.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
So moving forward, so what was the aftermath? So the court cases that you basically get fined $150 for the, not stopping at a stop sign, which is nonsense in my opinion.
It's amazing the lengths that, everybody went to when they were going after me on these wrongful accusations and then obviously criminal charges later. Is when we got to trial, it kind of manifested itself in this way. The amount of perjury that I saw and witnessed in court, that those 5 days I was in court, was just baffling and amazing to me. I never thought it would go that deep or that crazy. And I saw it firsthand, and it was easy to point out. And I'll give you some examples here in a minute. But the government had 9 witnesses that they put up on the stand for their case against me. And of those 9, 8 of them still worked or lived or both at West Point during this time when I went to court. The one person who did not remain at West Point was one of the MPs who was at the gate that you saw in the video, who talked to me through the window. He had since PCS'd and moved to Germany. He was an MP in Germany, but they flew him back for this case. Another sign of how deep they're willing to go to try to convict me on this thing. And lucky for that guy, he came. I'm actually glad he came, because when it came time to tell the truth on the most important part of the matter, when they asked him why he never pulled me over at the gate for not stopping at the guard check and showing my ID, he says under oath in court, and it's in court records and court testimony, that when he talked to me through the window of my car, he did not observe any signs of intoxication, and therefore he felt he had no probable cause at the time to pursue me and pull me over for not showing the ID or anything. And that was said in court. That's court record. That's the thing. So case closed, drop the mic, done deal. That should have been done the night of the incident, to be honest with you. Well, it took 15 months to get that out. But the amount of perjury. So let's start with this. The very first witness they put on the stand was the meat carver. Ian Blair. And this guy's original statement, 15 months earlier on the night in question was already outrageous, mischaracterized, grossly overblown, and somewhat fabricated in some instances. And then 15 months later, it got even worse. He gets on the stand and just totally exaggerates an already fabricated, exaggerated story he said in the first place.
Right.
And some examples of that were, he said our interaction was like 10 minutes long. He said there were nobody around the meat carving station when I was there with him. And he says that I was threatening him and physically imposing on him. And that when I turned around to walk back to my seat, I could barely walk. And then on the way back to my seat, I took a swing at a female manager that was also there catering the event. And now it's funny because the very next witness they put on the stand was that female manager.
Right.
And she never mentioned anything about me taking a swing at her, which should tell you that the whole thing was a joke. It was a lie. And it's funny that none of the 146 guests in there saw me arguing with a guy for 10 minutes, staggering back to my table and then taking a swing at somebody. Not one person stepped in, right? Come on. My lawyers exposed that very quickly and debunked the entire storyline. Nothing happened even close to what was alleged. The next big perjury thing that happened there was they brought the bartender in from Hotel Fair. Now, the bartender there from Hotel Fair, she's a 20-year-old female, and she was brought in, and she did a sworn statement, I believe it was 5 days after the night in question. And her sworn statement was so favorable to me that she gave to the police that day that I actually used her sworn statement as one of my addendums to my letter of reprimand rebuttal. Because it actually showed she told the truth and it was very favorable to me. Now, fast forward to trial 14, 15 months later, she gets on the stand and she says the 180 complete opposite, whole new story of what she observed of me at the Hotel Fair. She said things like, I showed up drunk, I could barely talk. As the more I drank, the more sleepy I got. Then I started arguing with her when she tried to cut me off, and that she tried to force water, make me to take water, and I was arguing with her on that. She had to help me sign my credit card tab because I couldn't sign it. And then I staggered out, barely could walk when I left the place. All right, that was basically her testimony. And then my lawyers just walked up there with that same original sworn statement, admitted it into evidence, had her verify that it was her statement, that she wrote it, she signed it back on July, 27th, 5 days after the night in question. And she said yes. And then they said, okay, show me anywhere in that 2-page document that you wrote where you said that my client was intoxicated. Show me where you said that he was staggering and couldn't talk anymore. Show me where he argued with you when you cut him off. Show us where you helped him sign the credit card. It was not in there. That was the point. Right. She never mentioned it. And you would think something 5 days after the night in question, your mind's probably more clear of what happened than 14, 15 months later, that those big items would be listed, and they weren't because it never happened. Right. So then they had her read to the jury, a few sentences out of the thing. Those sentences were stuff like, I served him 2, maybe 3 drinks the entire time, and he was fine the entire time. He was professional and courteous to me before he knew who my father was and after. Her father is the command sergeant major for the superintendent of West Point. I'll let you connect the dots on that, why the story changed so quickly, but that's what happened. And then my lawyers asked him, what was the last thing that was written on your sworn statement? The MPs, she had to read to the jury. Well, the MPs asked her, is there anything else you'd like to provide to this investigation to help us out? And she replies in her sworn statement, no, I just want you to know he was professional and courteous the entire time. I mean, again, mic drop, crazy perjury. And then the last one, the one that really breaks my heart the most, was my deputy jumped into the perjury game. And that totally bummed me out because we were good friends, colleagues, trusted work agents. And why he would do this, I'll tell you in a minute, but it was crazy. He was always kind of 50-50 with everything he would say about that evening, the parts that he was brought into. He would say things that would favor me. Then he would say something that would favor the government. Then he would say something that favored me. But he did say the truth about why he came to my house, what he was told, on the phone by the MPs, what they talked about behind the house. Those things were all true. And those things I used in my rebuttals and everything I'm telling you today. But when he gets on the stand, the prosecution was trying to make a big deal about over 2 hours I was unmonitored in my house. And when my deputy, Mr. Eric Mitchell, arrived with Command Sergeant Major Frazier into my house up to the second floor and woke me up in the middle of the night at about 2:45, they asked him, what did you observe when you first saw Colonel Bianchi when you were in his house? And he said first, he looked like somebody who had just woken up. Okay, that's fair. That's exactly what happened. But then they go on and they say, was he intoxicated? He says, yes, definitely. He was definitely drunk, which, by the way, shouldn't matter if I was or wasn't because I've been home for over 2 hours. But they say, well, how did you know he was a drunk? And this is where the perjury starts. I had to help him get dressed. And then they made him describe it. He was trying to put on his shorts. He almost fell down. So I helped him get dressed and put his belt or pants on or whatever. And I was just sitting there thinking, I've never in 15 months heard any remote version of someone help me get dressed ever come out. So I was beside myself. That did not happen. And so the next day when my command sergeant major takes the stand, my lawyer simply asked her, did you or Mr. Mitchell or anyone else help Colonel Bianchi get dressed in his room that evening? She says, in her own words, and this is how she talks, no, he's a grown man. The man can dress himself. And then my lawyers proceeded. Well, did you do anything with the clothes? Did you, she goes, yeah, I just handed him the clothes and he got dressed. And so my lawyer's like, well, why did you have the clothes? She goes, because where we were standing in the doorway, I was next to his dresser in his bedroom, and it looked like clothes that he probably had just taken off to go to bed were there. And since he was in his underwear, we're trying to bring him out of the house. She goes, sir, you need to get dressed. And she hands me my clothes. And I sat on the bed, she said. As I sat on the bed to put my shorts on, she moved my shoes closer to my feet. That was it. That was her helping me get dressed. No one touched me. No one helped me get dressed. Just simple, hey, throw us outside.
Yeah.
But the amount that I bring all this up because not only did they relieve me, not only did they give me a letter of reprimand in my personal file, not only did they make me go through an Army grade determination review board, they went all out with federal charges over misdemeanors in federal court. And then they went above and beyond to try to convict me by having folks lie on the stand. And the reason why I know that is the U.S. attorneys met with some of my own witnesses prior to trial, one of them being Command Sergeant Major Frazier and my deputy, Mr. Mitchell. And my sergeant major called my lawyer and I and said, look, I just met with the U.S. attorney, and they asked me basically to change my story. And she said, I will not do that. I will not do that. I will tell you exactly the truth of what I saw, what I heard, what was told to me, that night, where I was involved, and that's it. And all I told her was, I don't need you to do anything on the stand except tell the truth.
Yeah.
Just tell them what happened, tell them what they told you to get you to the house, and tell them what you observed, and that's it. And she did that.
What did the judge say at that point when she said that?
Well, she didn't say that under oath. She said that to my lawyer and I
okay.
before trial. She was giving us a heads up saying, hey, they just called me in, and I spent 2 hours getting questioned by the U.S. attorney and the JAG officer. And what she said, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, so I apologize.
Sure. Yeah.
She did say something to the effect of, to me, my lawyer, it's awful what they're saying about you, meaning me.
Yeah.
It's horrendous what they're doing. And they were asking me things like, how come your story doesn't jive with everybody else's? How come you won't change this? How come you won't say that? And she goes, because that's not what happened. That's not what I observed.
Coercing a witness. That's a mistrial right there. I mean, done.
Yeah. It's hard to prove. It's her word versus
her word against,
I'm just telling you for context of this interview. I mean, that's what happened.
No, I appreciate that. But I've got just a couple of questions, just if we get backtrack, because I don't want to cut you off. What was the size of this Ian guy? How tall was he? How big?
Average height. I mean, I would say, I don't know, 5'9", 5'10". I don't know. And what was not? I'll be honest with you. I don't even really remember what he looks like, to be totally honest with you. I saw him. Yeah. I saw him that night. And I saw him in trial. So just an average dude.
I guess I'm saying that because I mean you're an intimidating dude, right? I mean you got a boxer's face. You told me you're 6'2", 240.
Don't get me wrong. I get that all the time. My biggest strength sometimes is my weakness because I have an imposing command presence.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm a teddy bear. That's just kind of funny. Yeah. But it works to my advantage. And in some cases, I've been called a bully before. Oh, you're just a bully. I am a bully in the China shop. But I will tell you this. If that guy was so threatened by me, right, this came out, in court and everything. If he was so threatened by me, my interaction with him was around 7:30 p.m. The MPs never arrived until almost 9 p.m. And I found out later that the phone call was placed to the MPs around 8:30, 8:45-ish that night. Right. So if I was so threatened, why didn't you, one, tell your own boss about what happened? Why didn't you grab any of the 146 people in there, 2 of them being the current superintendent and the former superintendent, And this guy's had worked at West Point for at least a decade, so he knows who's important.
Sure.
Why couldn't you grab one of them if you're? No, he nothing. He was upset that he got pulled out of his job that night and told to go sit in the office while the event was till the event ended, and then they'll deal with him. That's what happened. He was a very disgruntled.
But the point that he claims that you were slobbering drunk when he came up to the meat station, right?
Yeah.
But then the MPs came and interviewed you, and I read the MP's report. They don't mention that. They just mentioned they saw a drink in your hand, and they don't even mention that it's alcohol. It could have been anything, right?
Correct. No one saw me drink there. That's the funny part.
Right.
No one can say that. I'm the one that admitted I had a drink. I said, yeah, I had a drink at the table. Buddy bought it for me. Having dinner.
So this guy claims you're slobbering drunk, but the MPs don't see you drunk when they first interviewed you at Eisenhower Hall, right?
Right. Correct. And then in court, the two MPs that arrived and the deputy that was there, because the senior MP never was brought into the court, but the two MPs that were there and my deputy, they're all questioned in court about the Eisenhower Hall part of the night. And my lawyers flat out said it. If this guy was so dangerous and did everything that you guys are alleging, what did you do about it? Did you ever detain him? Did you ever arrest him? Did you ever give him a ride home? Did you ever tell him, sir, you need to leave? Did you ever? No. All three of them left with no issues.
Right.
And the senior MP even looked me in the face and said, this looks like it was blown out of proportion. Enjoy the rest of your night. It was a total, I mean, I thought it was over, Assad. I thought it was over when I told the manager on the meat carving guy. That's the funny part. And then I thought it was over again when the MPs came, and I was annoyed by that. I fully admit I was really annoyed by that because I know how that works. The optics look bad. It's on the blotter report. The MPs got called out, But once I realized I thought common sense was going to prevail, I forgot about it again. I'm like, this, okay, whatever. I didn't even know the meat carver's name till we started going to court.
Yeah, but the problem, I mean, the issue that I see is, okay, so you get relieved, and then you're sort of in limbo, essentially in West Point prison for 15 months. You can't talk to the media. You can't talk to any of the witnesses. You're going to get hammered for witness tampering. So, I mean, you're suffering, with your family.
Correct.
I mean, that's mind-blowing to me. So what happened during that 15-month period when you were
So
in limbo?
it's funny. So let's go into this. So a couple things happened. And this is where I like to say the process is the punishment, right? The entire process is the punishment. And I think folks who are listening to this podcast, I don't think people truly understand what happens to a person and their family when people are wrongfully accused, whether it's deliberately or there's just an honest, negligent mistake. Sure. But when you're wrongly accused of something, and then on top of that, it's not fully investigated correctly. In my case, there was no 15-6 done to mitigate the conflict of interest of having folks that I'm in charge of investigate me and themselves and make their own spin on everything, which is what they did. What they don't see is the other side that happens. And so I'm here balancing this act early on in the process of trying to play the game, be professional, cooperate. The superintendent asked me, hey, we're going to investigate. I just ask that you cooperate and be patient, let the process play out. And I bought into that shit, man. I was a 27-year, 9-month veteran. I was on the other side of that process as a commander. Right. Like I had faith in things. Right. So I let the process play out, thinking they'll get to the truth eventually. And if they still want to do something to me, so be it. But the truth will be the truth. And there was no investigation. I know they initiated one, which is another weird thing I want to get to the bottom of. I know they initiated a 15-6, but then 2 to 3 days after they initiated, it was stopped. And the reason why I know they initiated because 2 of my 06 peers, Colonel peers, told me that they were asked to be the investigating officer in my case. So I know they were starting one, and then it stopped.
But you can't do that. I mean, you can't stop an investigation. You have to adjudicate it one way or the other.
They went with the law enforcement report, and that's all they used. The one that was made up by the MPs I was in charge of. Yep. But I only bring it up because to me it's very suspicious. I have my own theories. Yeah. So I don't want to, maybe they didn't want to deal with the MP corruption that night for going into my house illegally. Maybe they didn't want to deal with any of that crap, And so they said, yep, don't do the 15-6. So I do know the 15-6, you can do a
Yeah.
Freedom of Information Act on a 15-6. You can't really do that on a police report all the time. So there's some of that going on. That's my theory anyway.
I think what happened was they, in a rush to judgment, they bought off on the MP's version. They relieved you, and then they figured out we don't have anything on this guy.
They relieved me 30 days later. I was in
Right.
limbo for 30 days where they were supposedly
Right.
investigating. They
Right.
did no 15-6. It was just the MPs.
Right. So
Yep.
then to silence you, they prefer charges. I mean, this is an old trick that many commands play quite often. You know,
Right.
if it's because once you prefer charges on somebody, that person is in limbo status. You can't talk to anybody. Only person you can talk to is the military lawyer that's appointed to him. That's it. Or unless you get an outside lawyer, and in some cases they're not.
I got some civilian lawyers. I
Yeah.
hired some civilian lawyers. Yep. So
So
go back to your original question. There was that portion of it, and then I didn't get actually charged with anything criminally until October.
okay.
That's how long it took for the court documents to catch. So whenever they filed it, it was never made known to me till October. So this thing happened in July. I'm not criminally charged till October. But in the meantime, I got a GOMAR and I got it permanently filed in my personnel file.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, they're just.
Yep. So then I get the charges. And when I had the charges, I had to go to my arraignment. I believe my arraignment was in December, if I remember correctly. I don't remember the exact date. And when I got to my arraignment, I pled not guilty, obviously. And then the judge released me on my own recognizance. These were all misdemeanor and below charges. But because of the type of misdemeanor the DWI was coded as in federal court, I was mandated into the custody of the U.S. Marshals for supervision until my case was over. So after my arraignment, I was taken downstairs. I got reprocessed, refingerprinted, rephotographed. I had to sign off on all these things saying I was going to check in with this U.S. Marshal twice a month. I had to let him come to my house and inspect my entire home and go through my personal things. I had to check in with him if I was going to leave the area, get his permission, if I was going to leave the Southern District of New York's area. And one example of why this was embarrassing was, in addition to my family knowing this, I had to call this U.S. Marshal law stuff. We actually were allowed to go take a trip to Italy on vacation to visit my dad and stuff, which was fine. They let me go do that. They never stopped me from traveling. U.S. Marshals were actually pretty cool. I'll be fair with them. They were actually pretty good guys. But I went to go to Italy, and when I came back into the States and went through customs, my passport was flagged. They thought I skipped the country while I was under arrest with a warrant or something to that nature. Yeah. So they brought me and my family into this back room like a criminal at the airport. I had to then explain this whole thing I'm explaining to you. And then I had to get them to call the U.S. Marshal to verify my story. And then they let me back into the States. I mean, it was crazy. And the whole time, even the U.S. Marshals kind of giving me this eyeball look like, is this really happening to you? Like, you're a colonel in the Army and you never even were pulled over. And yet here we are. Like, it was crazy. But then the other thing I wanted to mention you too, in addition to that embarrassment, I was trying to play the game early on to be a professional soldier or whatever. I remember I mentioned to you earlier that the MP company commander, who's not my commander, she's my subordinate when I was Garrison Commander, she gives me a command referral to SUD-C. I forgot what the acronym stands for, but it's Substance Abuse Counseling Program.
Cycle.
Yeah. And I got command referred, and she ain't the one that's supposed to command refer me. It has to be someone superior to me.
Right.
But I couldn't get out of it. I had to go do it because my lawyer was like, look, you don't want to rock the boat now. So just be a good person. So I had to go to mandated substance abuse counseling at the hospital at West Point. And when I did my intake, the lady was real nice. She said, you don't come off as an alcoholic. You don't have a problem. All the questions I've asked don't say it. All the blood tests don't show it. I did everything.
Right.
But yet they locked me into that course for like 6-7 weeks. I couldn't get out of it. And some of my peers who worked in the hospital, they turned on me too. They wouldn't even help me anymore. They were just like, oh, I think you need help, Tony. Maybe you should stay the course. Like, you guys are buying into the Kool-Aid too. You're already buying into this narrative. What I found out later was, you know what they had? All they had was the police report narrative.
Based on that, yeah.
And so it went through all this stuff until I had to go to some ASAP counseling, get a certificate, and then they released me. But when I retired, I didn't know this. It's in my record.
That
I'm
you're not.
command referred
Yeah.
for substance abuse. So it's in my record. Now, here's the funny part about this aside. A little humor here. That actually helped in my disability claim.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing. But hey,
Yeah.
whatever. But I only bring that up is the process is the punishment, and these are the things that go on to the person being accused and their family. It's crazy. And I'll be honest with you. I don't think everyone in the chain of command is privy to that. I really don't. I think they think, oh yeah, we relieved him, he's done, we got him as Gomar, we'll throw some charges at him, see you later.
Yeah.
All these ancillary things that go on behind the scenes that no one hears about.
Yeah.
You know, and then you're ostracized, obviously. So everywhere we go. So one of the things I like to do is watch basketball.
Uh-huh.
I had courtside seats at all the Army basketball games, and I refused to let this situation ruin my love of sports. So I would sit center court on the court side with everybody who hates me or likes me watching me.
Yeah. Good for you. Yeah.
You know,
That's awesome.
But, yeah.
So who stuck up for you? Was there any general officers? I mean, 27 years in the military, you obviously had to know some
So I
generals.
had a lot of folks stick up for me. A lot of folks wrote letters on my behalf for the Grade Determination Board. A lot of folks would call me and mentor me throughout this ordeal. And the shocking part of all that, the senior mentors I had, a lot of 3-star retires, a 4-star retired, whatever.
Yeah.
Nobody was shocked by how I was being treated.
Really?
Yeah, they felt bad for me. They said it was wrong, but they also said that's what happens. I hate that. I hated that answer. Like, I hated that. Like, what are we doing about it? You know? But they stuck up for me. They're good. I mean, I know a couple senior folks actually tried to, on my behalf, lobby leadership to like get rid of the Gomar. Why are you doing charges of this guy? You're going to look stupid if you do charges against Tony. He's going to win, and nobody would budge. Nobody would change.
But I when we were talking before, you had a 3-star, retired 3-star in line with you.
Yeah, so Lieutenant General retired, Bob Caslin, the 59th Superintendent of West Point, great American, great human being. Now I didn't know him well. I crossed paths with him when I taught at West Point earlier. When he was the superintendent, two superintendents ago. We interacted briefly here and there. He was a former football player. I'm a former football player, so we'd see each other at those events. He knew I was an officer representative for the football team, so when he was around the team a lot, he'd see me. We'd talk a little bit. But I wouldn't call ourselves friends or buddies or whatever. He was just kind of like a de facto mentor in a way that I would maybe ask a favor for here or there in the past, but nothing crazy. We don't text regularly. We don't call regularly. We do now after this ordeal, but not before. And just on that particular night at Eisenhower Hall, we were both approaching the buffet line together, started talking about a conversation, started talking about Garrison Command stuff. He was asking me about the storm and great job taking care of the storm damage and blah, blah, blah. And we're doing this as we're going through a line, and he's in one buffet line, I'm in the other. We're parallel walking, but everything meets up at the meat carving station. And he arrives at the meat carving station literally at the same time I do. So if anybody can validate whose side of the story is accurate over where the interaction occurred, it's that guy, a 3-star retired general officer. And he, on his own will, on his own accord, was willing to fly in and testify on my behalf. He wrote a statement on my behalf for all the pretrial stuff, and then he came in person from Florida to testify in the Southern District of New York that basically what you guys are saying alleged he did with this meat carver did not happen. I was standing right there, and there was no yelling, no commotion, no nothing. And he even said to the prosecutor, if anything of the sort would have happened that night in that room, either myself or the current superintendent that was there or any of the other alumni from various decades, all former military or current military, would have stood up and did something. Tony, let's go outside. Hey, break this up. Hey, nothing happened. That's the thing. And so that was, and when he got put on the stand, the prosecutors like to play the game with all my witnesses. Oh, so how long did you know Tony? Oh, I've known him throughout the years. I follow him, whatever. Oh, would you consider yourself friends? And the general's like, absolutely not. I'm a 3-star, retired general. He's a colonel. He's like, I know Tony. I know he's a former ball player, a good officer. I'm very proud of him for being, 06 Garrison Commander. We like to prop up my former football players that do well in the Army. I like to follow those guys, but we're not friends.
Right.
He made it very clear up front, which made his testimony, he's
Yeah,
already credible to begin with, even more credible. So I thank him for standing up and telling the truth, because he did not have to do that. He had nothing to gain by flying to New York to testify on my behalf. He really didn't personally. He had nothing personally to gain. So,
man, I'll tell you what, you had somebody after you, with somebody with a lot of power that colluded to bring your downfall, I think. But ultimately, I think at the end, I think you're getting, you left the Army with your dignity and honor intact. I think that's the most important.
I think so. I think so. And I'm mentally in a good place. But it's interesting you say somebody's out to get me, like, with a lot of power.
Yeah.
Because what my lawyers still keep questioning, in addition to why the 15-6 was stopped, the other question they always have is, why did the U.S. attorneys, when they were handed the case, continue to prosecute? Yeah. We actually thought it was a good thing when it got handed over to the U.S. attorney, because when I asked the judge, the federal magistrate, to do a jury trial versus a bench trial, that's when West Point determined we're going to hand this over. The SJA's office determined we're going to hand this case over to the U.S. attorney to be lead prosecutor, because we're not equipped to handle a jury trial in the way they are. That was their reasoning. But they still had a JAG co-counsel as part of their team. Sure. But we thought now somebody outside of the West Point circle, outside of the military circle, we have now a common sense U.S. attorney that's going to look at this and go, this is a turd case. What are we doing to this guy? And drop it. They went double down harder. I mean, they went crazy. So my lawyers think somebody told them you need to prosecute. We don't know who that is. We don't know why. It's just interesting.
It's crazy. I mean, I've never heard anything like this.
It's all over a piece of meat too, which is the humorous part.
Fat, not meat. If it was meat, we wouldn't be here, right? There's a plate of fat.
There you go. Yeah, it's just
unbelievable.
It's a sad state of affairs, but again, that's why I'm glad I get to tell my side of the story, because I think people need to judge the facts for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you hear me talk, and when you watch the video of me driving through the gate, and when you see the testimony of other folks that stood up for me, I mean, it's and you saw the perjury done in trial. It's just crazy.
So, I went through a lot of the court documents on this whole thing. Yeah. So, I mean, I know the story, and everything you've told me is corroborated by the court documents, and the video that you provided, the CCTV video, 100%. So there's absolutely no reason to doubt your testimony or what you're saying whatsoever. I think this whole thing was overblown, and it sickens me that, the institution after 27 freaking years would pull a stunt like this. And, as I said, we're men. We can handle it. We can handle any punishment. We can go to combat. We can do whatever, right? But it's the families that suffer, and we sort of bullshit each other about the value of military families. But then they have no issue with making them suffer for 15 months.
Right.
And it's mind blowing to me, and I'll tell you why it's mind blowing is because officers do it to officers, and I'm not saying an officer should cover up for another officer, right? But an officer wouldn't do that to an enlisted. They would have some empathy, right?
Whatever they did to me, if I did that to a subordinate officer, a junior officer, or an enlisted person, or I let somebody under me do that to somebody in their command, we would flame them.
Yeah,
we would
absolutely.
Light them up.
Yeah.
Yet that's my whole point. Who's holding who accountable in this case?
Yeah.
I've won in DMV court. I've won in federal court.
Yeah.
I basically won in the Grade Determination Review Board. I'm probably going to get my GOMAR permanently removed. Yeah. It's in the process right now. I go, who's holding these folks accountable that did this to me? There's no recourse.
Yeah. It's sad, isn't it?
It's terrible. It's terrible.
Man, my hat's off to you. You're a better man than all those clowns. I tell you what. I mean, really. I mean, it's amazing to hear the story, and amazing that you survived it, because many people wouldn't have, right? And
there are some dark moments.
Yeah.
So start to question yourself a little bit. You're like, man, am I that bad of a guy? Like, really?
Yeah. No. I also want to thank you for coming out and speaking out about it. And the reason you're speaking out, I believe, is so it doesn't happen to somebody else. What's 100%. Happened to you has happened. It's happened. And I can see the love of institution that you have. So it's got not, that's not the issue. The issue is because you love the institution so much, you don't want this to happen to somebody else. That's
That
the
is
whole
100%,
point.
that is 100% correct. I mean, the Army has been good to my family and I.
Yeah.
I will never talk anyone out from joining the military. I think it's a great step in
Yeah.
life. And that's why I don't want stuff like this to continue to happen. This is not right what happened
Yeah.
to me. This is
Absolutely.
not right. And I want to get in a part of this will, maybe it'll exonerate me a little bit in my mind anyway. But really, let's get the facts out there. Let's get both sides of the story, and people can be transparent with the community at West Point and with the community of the Army at large.
Yeah.
Here's what happened to this guy. I'm just one example of things that go on like this. What are we doing to fix it? What are we doing about it?
Unfortunately, your side of the story never came up.
Because it's not allowed to. The process doesn't allow it to.
Even when you got vindicated in court, you still had other wickets to go through, for your retirement, for your disability, for your grade, and all that stuff. And you can't really say anything against the command, or they're going to hammer you again.
That's a good point. That's a great point, because a lot of folks come through. Why didn't you file a congressional? Why didn't you do an IG complaint? All my mentors told me this. The IG complaint, I'll talk that first. It's a self-licking ice cream cone.
Yeah.
They're not going to, they'll do an investigation. They'll do a good one too, by the way.
Yeah.
And they'll see what happened. But they're not going to put that out there to the public in a way that makes the Army, and in this case, the Academy, look terrible.
Right.
They're not going to do that. They'll find some way to spin their findings to make me look bad.
Right.
That's what my mentors are. These are retired GOs telling me this, And then the congressional, that's just a lot of busy work. You're talking to a congressional staffer. They're gonna go to West Point. Maybe you'll cause a little bit of stress on the staff at West Point. They'll drum up some talking points back. Nothing gets changed.
Right.
So I said, you know what? I'm not doing that. There were basically 3 processes I had to go through because of this.
Right.
So I'll start off. So I had the administrative process. So I was given that GOMAR. I tried to rebut the GOMAR, and it didn't work. And so, lesson learned to anybody listening, they gave me the GOMAR before I got criminally charged. And so I'm at this point still trusting the system and playing the game.
Right.
I'm trying to write this rebuttal in a professional manner while not admitting to anything,
Sure.
guilty of anything, but trying to be a professional and say, look, I'm guilty of putting myself in this position. Here you go. I'm sorry, whatever. And they try to use those words against me in court, which is kind of funny. So I will tell anybody, if you're going to be criminally charged, don't write any rebuttals to anything. But anyway, I got a GOMAR, I got put in my permanent file, and I got relieved. So those were my administrative issues. And then I had to go through a grade determination review board on top of that, which I came out favorably. So I get to retire my rank and everything, which is great. Then I had the DMV issue in the state of New York because I refused the breathalyzer. Doesn't matter the context. It automatically pops that you refuse the breathalyzer. You have to go through a DMV hearing. And normally these hearings are open and shut. People don't even show up to them because they're guilty. Well, we showed up. And we did it on, it was an online just like this with the judge. The MPs had to be there.
Right.
I had to be there with my witnesses. We had the video. And the judge flat out, after 2 separate hearings, threw the case out, closed it, never took my driving privileges, and wrote on the record the reason for closing the case was the respondent was hauled out of his residence 2 hours after an event at West Point without a warrant by friends of his who were coaxed to do so by the MPs. That's on the record, public record, in a New York State DMV administrative hearing. And then I had to go to federal court now. So I'm dealing with this process simultaneously. Now I'm going to federal court, and you saw the outcome there. I was found not guilty on the DWI and the disorderly conduct. The misuse of the vehicle was thrown out before trial, and I was convicted of a traffic citation of not stopping at an actual stop sign, even though I stopped
short of it.
Yeah, I wasn't going to argue that anymore. I just paid the $150. So, and then now I'm petitioning to have my GOMAR removed from my permanent file because it's more principle than anything.
Yeah.
Like my lawyer told me, you don't want your grandkids one day just looking you up and going through your personal records and finding out there's this GOMAR in there, which basically makes you sound like a monster. Nothing like I told you what happened.
And then, so after all this was adjudicated, how long did you stick around West Point?
So I got adjudicated in September. I left West Point officially, physically in mid-January, and I retired January 31st.
Of 2025.
Past January 25. Yep.
So you just recently retired.
About 7 weeks ago. I shaved just for you today, Assad.
You did. I wish you
Yes, I
hadn't.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, I get, everybody comments on my beard. It's fine.
So,
I had a guy tell me I need to go to a beautician. I cut my own hair. For the last 45 years, I've been cutting my own hair to match my, and the only reason it shines, it reflects light on. I got gray hair like crazy, but I put coconut oil in it. So it's
that's
just
good.
a thing. But, what now? What are the plans for Anthony? How do I call it
Bianchi.
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 Bianchi?
Good Italian name. Bianchi. CH is a K sound. So
Bianchi.
Bianchi. Yep.
Anthony
Yeah.
Bianchi. Good to
Yeah.
go. So what's next?
I'm enjoying retirement. I'm taking my time looking for a job. I'm trying to be positive about my life and not let this bother me anymore.
Yeah.
I'm way over all the relief and stuff. That was done over and done with. I'm just more, the only thing that eats at me is I don't want this to happen to anybody else.
Yeah. I agree.
And in today's climate, where you've heard our Secretary of Defense talk about the JAG Corps and how it's got to be revamped, and how I truly believe the JAGs the last 10 years run loose and fast with this preponderance of the evidence lens, and commanders, even tacitly at times, let them do so. And I think we lost our way as commanders to use commanders' discretion. If a commander thinks this person didn't do something that's that bad, then stick up for that person.
Right.
Or don't hammer them if you don't need to. It doesn't make any sense. And I think we let ourselves in this hypersensitive, hyper-investigative, zero-tolerant environment that we've created. I think a lot of commanders are paralyzed to do the right thing. And they let their judge advocate generals, term jagoffs, I guess that's the funny term now. They do their thing, and I think it's gone off the deep end. That's my personal opinion. I think we need to do
I think you're right. I think you're 100% right. And the other side, the bad commanders have weaponized the JAG to go after people, to target people. And the JAG, they just follow along because their fitness report is, written by, performance evaluation is written by that commander. And that's what has happened. It's also in the Marine Corps. So the Army's not unique to this by any sense.
And I hope, aside, no one takes me talking on this platform as anything negative towards my alma mater or the Army. I love the Army. The Army's given my family and I a great life. I mean, I firmly believe in the institution and its mission. I firmly believe in the academy and its mission. I mean, I would tell any kid if they want to go to West Point, please, by all means, go. You'll love it.
What are some of the lessons learned that you want to share with the up and coming officers?
I would share this. Number one, know your blind spots. I'll start with that. Know your blind spots. Yeah. As you get older and more rank and more responsibility, it's tougher and tougher to see. And going back to your comment about the Sergeant Major, that's a good person to help task to find your blind spots, because he or she could be an honest arbiter with you and say, hey, look, these people don't like you. Here's what's going on. I knew they didn't like me. I just didn't know how bad the MPs didn't like me. That was my blind spot. And I could have probably did something to mitigate that, to rectify and maybe not get caught up in this. Number two, know your demeanor, know your personality. What I mean by that is I am a charismatic, life of the party, to have a good time. People know I like to drink. I'm not ashamed to say any of that. That's been me my whole life. And I never been a person to quote unquote play the game as I got higher in rank. I think that was one of my strengths, but it's one of my weaknesses. One of my mentors told me, you know what you're guilty of that night, Tony? I go, what? Being yourself. You're guilty of being you. Yeah. It's a valid point. Right, wrong, indifferent. So my point is, know your personality. Know what things that you like to do can get you into trouble, even if it's not done intentionally.
Right.
And I think that's where my judgment and error may came into play. Looking back, hindsight's 2020. But I had a lawyer tell me once those MPs came to check on you at the dinner, you should have just went home. You should have just went home. Whether you agreed with it or not, you should have just went home, and then be no issue. But I just didn't pay attention. And the other part is, I also think people formed an opinion about me based on the narrative they thought they heard, the rumor mill, because of what they knew of me in the past at other social events, other things. So you just got to be, as you're going through your career, what you do is telling a story about who you are as you get to your higher rank, and it could come back to haunt you. I think that's what happened to me a little, in some way there. And the other part, honestly, the system is never as honest with you as you think it is. The system is never as honest with you until you think it is. Like I said before, I was the commander on the other side of this system.
Right.
I trusted this system. And I would argue if I did or allowed a subordinate of mine to do this to another subordinate the way I was treated, we would fire that person. We would hammer that person. But yet, the system is not set up to take care of senior leaders. It's just not. It's just not. So as you get older in your career, be cognizant of that. And that's why we need a revamping. We need a revamping of something to address this one dynamic, which I think is hurtful. I think more people are hurt by it than people think.
Okay. I mean, but how come? I mean, it's very rare you see 06s and higher held accountable for anything. Generally, it's sexual misconduct, generally speaking.
Correct.
So an incident like yours, there's another case going on at West Point with an 06. I
know the case.
Yeah.
You need to have that. You need to have his side of the story on when his legal stuff's done.
I bet. I'd love to talk to him. But my point is, you look at all the general officer misconducts, most of them are sexual related, right? They're not performance related and whatnot. So do you feel there's a double standard of accountability in the military for officers and senior staff and COs?
I'll answer it this way, Assad. I don't think there's a double standard.
Right.
I think the perception of the double standard comes from this, and I'll say, here's where I'm going with this. I'm a colonel in the Army. I had 27 years of experiences. I had contacts, I had connections, I had the resources financially, whatnot. I can fight back to a degree and try to get to the truth and get through a 15-month legal process and get adjudicated. Yes, I still got relieved. Yes, I still got the letter of reprimand. But I'm able to at least stick up for myself. If this would have happened to a junior military officer or a young enlisted person, they're hammered. They're done. They're probably in jail. I don't know. So I think the perception derives from that. But yeah, I have different resources to fall back on. That's 100% true. So it's not necessarily a double standard. It's just we at this level have a different way of going about protecting ourselves, especially if we think we're innocent. So there's that. I do think that people need to realize that, again, the process is the punishment. This system is not set up for senior leaders to do well. Like I said, I've had no recourse up until recently to do anything, tell my side or nothing, because you're muffled.
Yeah, you're muffled. Yeah,
you're muffled and you can't. And oh, by the way, even when the court case was over in those last 3 to 4 months, I couldn't really say much either because you're still worried about your benefits, your rank, how they're going to retire you, what's going to, you don't know what's going to happen, and you got to get clear of all that stuff. And so, double standard. I actually think senior people we get it's harder on us in some ways. In my opinion, it's only harder on the junior folks because they just don't have the resources we have to fight back.
A fair point. Yeah. Well, what now for Anthony Bianchi?
What now? Like I said, I'm looking for a job. I am being patient with it. Some advice I got is take a breath. You've done 27 years, 9 months. Do something you want to do. I chose location over jobs. So I chose Florida to live. So now I got to find something where I can stabilize my family down here in Tampa, Florida. And we'll go from there. I'm writing a book. More to follow on that. I'm about 8 to 9 chapters in. And who knows? I've always had an interest in politics. Maybe this could be a springboard. Maybe not. I have no idea. But we'll see what happens.
You think politics is full of meat cutters, man. Stay away.
That's actually a pretty funny line right there. I like that.
Yeah, I'm dead serious. I mean, a lot of people ask me to go into politics. I want nothing to do with it because at the end of the day, you're going to tarnish and talk about blind spots. You're going to tarnish yourself one way or the other, right?
You can never win, right?
Yeah. So that'd be one thing. Now, really, any parting thoughts or anything that we missed?
Like I said before, I don't speak about this case to tarnish the Army or the Academy. I want to make that very clear again. I have nothing but thanks for the Army. the people that I've served with, the people that I've served under, the people that I've served over. I mean, the 99% of them are great Americans, great human beings. We all have our flaws. I just think that in my situation, there were a few bad apples in the bunch along the process, which made the process corrupt for me. And I want people to know this happened. I want the West Point community to know this happened. I want the Army to know this happened. And I want them to do something about it. I could just be one case of many that this has happened to, and it should not happen this way. It should not happen this way. And that's my parting thoughts. I think my family and I are over this. We're fine. I have sustained some mental, I talked to a therapist, full disclosure, not just because of this, but this didn't help anything I had before either. I mean, life's good now. I'm just glad I was able to tell my side of the story. People can judge me for what they want now. They have two versions now. They got the story they heard through the media, and they got my story.
You bring up a great point, because there's an incident with Lieutenant Colonel Schiller. I think you know about him in the Marine Corps when he spoke out. And in my mind, the Marine Corps completely mishandled that situation, because he was reaching out, right? And if we truly believe in this mental health, PTSD, TBI, and all that stuff, then we need to pause as senior leaders and say, okay, is this guy reaching out, and maybe bring him in and talk to him. And I think if you had been given that opportunity by the superintendent, in your chain of command, and said, hey, what the hell happened here? And let you just air out your things and listen to your side of the story, maybe this wouldn't have gone for 15 months. Maybe it would have ended right there and then, right or wrong. So I think it's really a shame how we treat people. We claim that we really give a shit about our troops, our Marines, our soldiers. But then the question is, do we, right? When it comes down to it. And it's really sad. And that's one of the main reasons, I kept quiet for 20 years. 20 years. I didn't even have a social media account. I had one email account. And once I saw, the Kabul withdrawal happening and the debacle there, and young Marines, soldiers, sailors losing their lives, and then I saw the Lieutenant Colonel Schiller incident, I said, I got to speak out. As a retiree, that's our obligation, to speak out and to make sure it doesn't happen to the subsequent generations. And I'm so glad you're writing a book, and I hope you do well in that. And I also hope that you continue to speak out on different platforms. I'm just a small, I'm like a little gnat, right, on YouTube. But I hope the big guys pick up on this and bring you in and talk to you, because this needs attention from the American public. And I think it's more important that the American public knows about this, because they pay the bills for West Point. They pay the bills for the Army, the Marine Corps, and all the other services, right? They're the bill payers.
Think about how much taxpayer money went towards prosecuting me for 15 months.
Yeah, imagine that. Insanity.
It is insanity.
That says it all. Yeah. Well, you got a great platform now, and I hope this picks up and other bigger platforms bring you on and talk about this stuff. It's very important. And I hope it gets into the DOD level, the SecDef level. I know I've got a picture of you with Pete Hegseth, and I'm sure at that point you couldn't say anything. You didn't know he's going to be Secretary of Defense, but now that he is, and he's met you, I'm sure he needs to be brought into this and find out what the hell exactly happened, and hold people accountable. That's all you want. You just want justice. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it, Tony. I really do. Thank you for coming on here and telling your side of the story. I think it's beneficial for the viewers and future generations of the U.S. Army, definitely. And I tell you what, I hurt for you and your family. I really do. I can feel it. And my apology means nothing to you, but I'm humbled and ashamed, honestly, for what happened to you and how your family was treated as an American, first and foremost, and as a Marine officer. It's terrible. It shouldn't happen. So again, thank you very much, and I wish you and your family the best. And keep charging, man. I really do. I think you're going to do some great things. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, that was a pretty interesting podcast. I found Colonel Bianchi to be very sincere and honest, and having read the court documents, everything that he told us is backed up by those court documents. There's obviously some sort of collusion going on. Somebody was out to get him. He was railroaded, in my opinion. A lot of people perjured themselves in court, and unfortunately, the command failed in its duty to protect this officer. And they basically weaponized the JAG Corps to destroy him and his career and his family. I find it freaking mind-boggling that they would take this whole thing to a federal court. And not only that, but they'd put him into this legal limbo for 15 months. And it makes absolutely no sense. You know, we say a lot in the military about taking care of our people and taking care of our families. But there are times when we don't. We do the opposite. And I think Secretary Hegseth is onto something with the JAG Corps here. I know several incidents where the lawyers in the military have targeted and weaponized themselves like a heat-seeking missile, and they go after people to destroy them and their families. Now, you got to remember, nobody joins the military with bad intentions. Shit's going to happen. Everybody makes mistakes. But we don't go in there and destroy people and their families and their careers for chicken shit stuff like rolling through a damn stop sign. This is absurd, and it should not be tolerated. I think it was a great disservice that happened to Colonel Bianchi. It should not have happened, and the command failed in its basic responsibilities when this matter could have been handled the next morning by the commanding general, the superintendent, whatever the hell they call him at West Point, and called him in and said, hey, what the hell's going on, stud? And yeah, he made a mistake by having a drink and driving, which he admitted to. And if that's warrants for him to be relieved, so be it. If warrants a warning, so be it. But this whole thing could have been adjudicated at the superintendent level, and he failed in his responsibilities. And you know, the sad part is we hand all this stuff over to lawyers to crucify people. This is not who we are. We don't eat our own. You know, we should have some sort of empathy, some sort of leadership responsibility to take care of our people when they make a mistake. Now, let me tell you something. No military is going to succeed with the zero defect mentality. Yeah, people are going to make mistakes, but based on the severity of the mistake, we should be able to handle the matter at the lowest possible level. Unfortunately, we don't do that because the generals lack the courage to you know, handle things themselves. They'd rather just hand it over to a bunch of you know, legal beagles, so these guys can go out and destroy families and careers. That's not leadership. That's just I'm at a loss. I don't even know what the hell to call it. So that superintendent at West Point, you failed in your freaking duties, bud. And you should have taken care of this officer. And I'm not saying it because he's an officer. I'd say that for any Marine. And quite frankly, if he was an enlisted person, somebody would have looked out for him. And nobody did. And I'm really freaking irritated that you know, his family had to suffer for 15 months, basically locked down at West Point. Tell you what, I'm all on board for Secretary Hegseth to reorganize the JAG Corps. It needs to be reorganized. And we need to stop weaponizing it and going after our own damn people for stupid shit like go rolling through a damn stop sign. I mean, you got to be shitting me. What the hell are we thinking? Now, you know, my blood pressure's going up a little bit, so I'll just calm down a little bit. Yeah, my blood pressure's going up because I've seen it happen. It happened to me. You know, when they threw some bullshit charges on me, one in front of an Article 32, they all got dropped because it was bullshit. I grabbed a Marine's arm in combat and pulled him towards me, my radio operator. And I said the F word in uniform when my damn commanding general has used profanity himself. But this hypocrisy's got to stop. This is not who we are. We are men of honor, and we're men of integrity, and we need to protect our own. You know, it's bad enough that people have to go overseas and serve our country and come back, you know, with moral injuries, with mental injuries, with physical injuries, or they don't come home at all. You know, and this is the treatment they get when we bring them home. It's horseshit. You know, and we should not put up with it. It's nonsense. And the senior leadership needs to start getting their act together. You know, I don't know what the hell happened in the military in the last 20 years, but we went off the deep end. And we need to get back to basics, fundamental leadership responsibilities, and take care of our own. That's all I got. Before I go, I just want to remind you to make sure, please hit a like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment at the end. Let us know what you think, because I think this is a very important topic and goes to the core of the matter. Colonel Bianchi is not the only one out there. This has happened to a lot of other people. There's Chief Warrant Officer LaRose, and I did a podcast on him. You know, you can check it out. The same thing happened to him. You know, we sent him up for a general court-martial on some chicken shit charges. I mean, what the hell are these generals thinking? You know, Have the intestinal fortitude to make decisions and take care of your own troops. That's the bottom line. And by troops, I mean officers and enlisted alike, your subordinates. That's your moral responsibility. Live up to it. That's all I got. Stay rugged, stay united. Con out.